It is every police leader's responsibility to not only continually develop their own skills and abilities, but to prepare the next generation of leaders. Retired Captain William Frost helps you meet this task by providing a clear blueprint to follow in his book, Leadership in Law Enforcement. To learn more about his book and other consulting and training he provides, go to www.code33consulting.com. That's code33consulting.com. From interviews to jail calls, Ditto Transcripts delivers fast, confidential, and court-ready transcription for law enforcement agencies. Ditto is CJIS compliant and is already working with agencies all over the U.S., including the Washington State Patrol and the National Park Service Investigations Unit. Get started now at dittotranscripts.com. That's dittotranscripts.com. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests of this show do not represent their employing agency, department, or organization. All information should be regarded as anecdotal, contextual, and educational, and should not be misinterpreted as legal or medical advice. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode. This is your host, Eric. Today I'm joined by Chief Cheol Kang. Chief, thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were talking as is usual a little bit before the recording. What have we covered so far? A little bit of your assignment, a little bit of why you're invited on the show, which is a very, I think, such an honor when someone anonymously is like, "Hey, you need to have this guy or gal on the show because they're such a true leader in the humble, serving, front-facing, lead from the front type of way," and that happened here. And so we haven't actually met before, so it's great to connect and meet virtually and start this conversation. And what else did we talk about? We talked about background and heritage, as far as like looking at your name and guessing if you're Korean, which I was correct. So
Yeah, spot on.
I want to own the own the point there, and a little bit of history. You started diving into your studies with Asian history and Mandarin in the Middle Kingdom. So I'm going to ask we don't bust out the Mandarin because I don't want to be put to shame right now by a Korean American chief right now.
I'm a little rusty on both the Korean and the Mandarin, but yeah,
Okay.
we'll stick with plain language English.
Likewise, I will share this. I don't know if I've said this on recording, but I grew up speaking Mandarin before English, and through the years, as a lot of it, I suppose kids of immigrants might be at times, is wanting to assimilate and quote unquote Americanize and not speaking the native language at home, and so it deteriorated over years and years and years. Going to Chinese school on Saturdays, and then later kind of rebelling and refusing to do that. Um, and then cut to being a police officer and being able to use Mandarin a handful of times, and even go to a neighboring city and get them enough for probable cause. Not something I would feel comfortable testifying in court about. They had to, best practice would be to use a legit translator later in the interviews. But I will say, within the last couple years, someone was looking for a Mandarin speaker in the city, and I'm like, I'll take a shot at it. And I showed up, and I started just saying, "Hey, how you doing? What happened? What can you tell me?" At least my attempt at it. And the guy looks at me square in the face and he says, in Mandarin, because I can understand better than I can speak, says, "I'm sorry, do you have someone that speaks Mandarin?"
Not
And
to
then,
crush your ego or anything with that.
yeah, and I looked at the the officer next to me, and I'm like, "We're gonna need to call somebody." In my head, I'm like, "I guess not. I guess we don't have someone that speaks Mandarin."
It's a perishable skill, the language.
Hmm.
So it's interesting you mentioned that you spoke Mandarin growing up in your household. That was the same for me speaking Korean in my household because my family we immigrated to the U.S. when I was just a year old, and of course, in an immigrant family, my parents didn't speak a lick of English, and
Mm,
so everything was Korean all throughout grade school. And I totally understand the social pressure of wanting to assimilate and trying to just totally convert to speaking only English. But it was challenging and trying to mix that in the household where my parents are slowly trying to learn English, and we're doing the same thing as well, in addition to all the cultural nuances of American English versus textbook English as well. So,
yeah,
and not if you're not using that language skill, because I think it's probably been more than 20 something years since I studied Mandarin in college. If you're not using it, you lose it.
yeah,
And the same with my Korean skills. If I'm not using it all the time, when I started patrol, uh, I did use it on scenes, and it was very helpful and a great tool, like you mentioned. But now I think I'm at the point where, other than going shopping and going to a restaurant, my Korean language skills are really limited.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I remember being in my adolescence and actually, I think I was trying to defend my choice, but in reflection, I do think this is true. I do think that my parents' English got dramatically better because my sister and I weren't speaking Mandarin and we would just speak English. And then it became kind of the version of Spanglish. I don't know what you call it,
Mhm.
like Manglish or something. But you'd use select words, or they would use words that were more, easier for them to think of. And my mom's quite fluent, but for sure, I can think about how much it improved. But it is something that I don't think many people say they regret, using their language, or practicing it more, whatever that may be.
Absolutely. For us, we call it Konglish.
Mm,
And even when I talk to my parents now, it's a mixture of Korean and then the occasional English word, because it's just easier to reference a more technical term in English and then continue on with just the basic conversational Korean. And thankfully, they understand what I'm saying when I talk to them.
yeah, yeah. It's English is such a hard language. I mean, I remember learning that Mandarin was a difficult language and there's so many differences. There's tonality and
Mhm.
such. And I even tried to take Mandarin in college when I was at University of Washington to fulfill my language credit. And there were and are so many uh, Asians, Chinese, I guess students, national Chinese, right, or Taiwanese nationals that speak Mandarin fluently, and then Asian Americans that do the same. That they have two tracks. They have a heritage branch and then a non-heritage, and so they made at least everyone at the time go through an in-person interview with the lead professor to assess, like, are you going to try to game the system and mess up the bell curve because you grew up speaking this? And so I went in the interview and she just starts like rattling off things in Mandarin and I'm trying to keep up, and she puts me in the heritage, and I found myself in a class where everyone grew up speaking fluently, or they spoke Cantonese fluently, and then the written language was exactly the same. And so
Okay.
I didn't know how to read or write. I still don't in Chinese, and so I spent more time trying to stay afloat in that class. Extra office hours, meeting up with my mom after work. She worked in Seattle at the time. I would drive down to downtown Seattle and we'd meet at like a Starbucks or a McDonald's and just go over my flashcards. And she's like, "How are you even learning this?" And it's such a pictorial language. And I started just showing her what I was doing, and I was like, this means student, right? So I this is kind of like the graduation cap, and then I would do. There's a stroke pattern. Is it the same for Korean? Like there's an order you're supposed to do the lines and the strokes. And I was doing it all backwards. She's like, no, a lot of the muscle memory is to help, like the orders to help you remember it. She's like, you can't learn it this fast. And I've never heard, I think traditional, tiger mom, never given an out. So like in such a significant way to be like, I don't know, this is like, how are you doing? I'm like, I'm getting B's. And then my teacher's assistant said, I can tell you're working harder than anyone else in this class, and I don't think it's going to happen. And so I was given permission from multiple angles just to like bounce out and drop the class. I took Spanish and it was like the most fun, easy thing ever. I was like teacher's pet because I got so into it. Um, but that was my adult experience with Mandarin officially.
It is. It's hard. There are components of Mandarin that make it probably one of the most difficult languages to learn, because you're absolutely right. There's no alphabet. It's all characters, and you're right about the brushstrokes and the order that you do it. The tones of having potentially five different words from one word
Mhm.
and how you can totally change the context. Again, good intentions, but totally offend someone just based on the tone. But the what I found to be the easiest and similar among a number of the East Asian languages is the conjugation of the sentence structure.
Mm.
Super easy. You're not dealing with the conjunctions and all these different principles of the sentence structure where it's just I go store. It's
Yep.
plain and simple, and it runs the same way that I found in Mandarin as it does in Korean.
Yeah, yeah, and so I'm glad you went there because that is something I wanted to share with just outside of us just reminiscing and nerding out on our shared Asian American upbringing, but the translation to listeners, so many of them being first responders or active community members and cops, is that degree of empathy and awareness. And we talk about cultural competency. I know that, CIT through CJTC just put out a module that I'm partway through. It's due in 2028. So some would say I'm way ahead of it, and some would say that they crushed that the moment it came out. Um, but it's on, Asian American history and cultural, I suppose, competency. But in that, yeah, I think it is very helpful to understand why someone saying something a certain way or just being patient or understanding like the vast differences can be helpful, right? And so the tonality, to give an illustration, poorly maybe, but is ma 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 ma, like that's ma, but it has four different meanings and different just
Mhm.
based on how I said it, not to mention how you combine it with other things and sounds and words. So as far as tone, like when we say something sternly or we ask a question, it can change things. I remember asking my grandpa if this is the correct way to say something, and my tone would go up at the end, like a question, and he would say no, and he would like correct it, like with the downward tone. But I was trying to ask the question, but it was not connecting. So he was just saying over and over, "You're saying it wrong," because my tone was going up at the end. But even like you pointed out, is that yeah, there's no plural as well, right? So you just say like instead of tables, three tables, you just say there's three table,
Mhm.
three of the table. And so it helped me understand too, I suppose like older, why my parents or other folks would say things incorrectly because it was more like a direct translation from what they were trying to say.
Exactly. Oh, you're absolutely right. Yeah, and in Mandarin, the question is more the ma, the neutral ma at the end versus where in English you're right about the inflection at the end going up. Is this your car versus
Yeah.
is this your car ma?
Yeah. It's more like they say like is this or is this not?
Hmm.
Like as far as like a direct translation, but yeah, I think it is so helpful because there are plenty of cultures and even I suppose like American like cultures where they would say different families or different groups might say like I'm not mad, this is how I talk, right? I've heard that so many times, officers myself included, be like, hey, like stop yelling at me, like I'm not yelling, this is how I talk. And there may be some truth to that, and so like let's read the room, let's read the context. Can we take a step back and try to navigate around that rather than two people continuing to escalate? And that is relevant to what you supervise now and what we're going to be talking about as well.
Absolutely. You gave me some flashbacks to some family gatherings where anyone on the outside would think there must be a DV going on there. I'm like,
We
no,
get those calls, right?
yeah, and you're like, no,
Hmm.
they're just having a party. They're getting together. That's how they talk.
Yeah, yeah. So Chief, you've given us a little bit for sure, but can you tell us a little bit more about your background growing up, what that was like, and then why police work? And before the
Oh
recording,
yeah,
you also threw in a little bit of your professional background as well in service.
absolutely. So my family and I, we immigrate. I was born in Busan, South Korea, and my family and I immigrated to the U.S. when I was just a little over a year old, and we wound up in the east side of Tacoma, growing up there for grade school. And for those who are not local to the area, the east side of Tacoma in the late '70s and '80s was rough. That was not a friendly area, especially for immigrants who didn't speak English. And um, we learned pretty quick and learned a lot of life lessons. And I think that's what motivated me to figure out what I wanted to do in life. And I seen a lot of good people get victimized, and I got to tell you that's what fueled my why on why I wanted to go into a profession to serve and to give back to the community. And of course, in standard Asian immigrant fashion, my parents were like, "No, we
Yeah.
want
What
you
are
to
you
be
doing?
a doctor or
Mm.
lawyer. We
Yep.
don't want you." I actually wanted to be a cop first, and they're like, "No way, we will not allow you to do that." And so my out was the military. And when I graduated high school, I actually started out my military career out at the Air Force Academy. Spent 2 years out there. Again, good people out there, but I wanted to go more Navy for the opportunities to command, where the Air Force was at the time was a much more pilot-driven organization
Hmm.
and pilot-centric, where the Navy, no matter what you do, where you are, you will command something. People, assets, and so I finished out my last 2 years through the Navy ROTC program at Seattle University, which crosstown with the University of Washington. So I spent a fair amount of time out there at Clark Hall and joined the Navy, see the world. My first duty station came right back to Whidbey Island,
Yeah. Got
Washington,
far away. Yeah.
which
It's beautiful
I'm
though.
blessed. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Mentally, preparing to go, to overseas to Japan or, out to Virginia or somewhere else. But the Navy was kind enough to send me right back home because my wife grew up in the Skagit Valley. So we were still
Okay.
close to her family, still close enough to my family as well. Did two tours with a couple of EA-6B Prowler squadrons up at Whidbey. And before I left active duty, you know, push out my inner childhood dream of being a cop, and I even had some of my Navy counterparts looking at me at the time like, "You're really? That's what you're gonna do? You're 5 foot again at the time. You're 5'5", a buck 30, wet. You're really gonna become a cop?" Because there's that stereotype of what a stereotypical cop looks like. I think I saw an article. It was, and I'll give props to California Highway Patrol. They they put up a poster of this 5'2" highway patrol officer, um, female, and they had her on a poster. I'm like, if she can do it, I can. I'm a couple inches taller.
Oh, back
So,
then?
yeah, and so I'm like,
Yeah.
because way back in the day, even Washington State Patrol had like a height requirement
Yep.
to
Yeah, I was just
even
gonna say
become a
that.
trooper.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
so. Um, I guess with that motivation, I started testing, and that was back in the day where you had to test every weekend with a different agency instead of now where you have the luxury of just doing one test and sending your scores out to multiple agencies. And Mukilteo, the city of Mukilteo Police Department was the first one to reach out and offer me a job before I even was off active duty, and they were willing to hold the spot for me. And when I left active duty, came on board with them and started my career out there. And I spent 20 years with the Mukilteo Police Department in a lot of different assignments: patrol, detectives, CIO, crime prevention, back to patrol sergeant, detective sergeant, operations commander, and then ultimately I was appointed as the police chief. And when I look back, and I served for 7 years as the police chief before I came over to the King County Sheriff's Office where I'm at right now. I was 39 years old at the time when I got appointed as the police chief, which um, I'll say in hindsight, when that position became open, I didn't, I didn't really want to put in for it.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm only 39. I got a long career ahead of me, and the average tenure of a police chief in the area is what, maybe 4 years, if that,
Yeah.
maybe
3 to 5
5 years.
sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. And my kids were young, but I also thought, if not me, then who? And I've seen, we've had good people come in from the outside, but knowing, I think, having a vision for the department and knowing our culture and where we needed to go, I put in for it, and I got it. And I served as the chief there for 7 years, and then a little over 2 years ago, came over to the King County Sheriff's Office because there was a great opportunity where the Sheriff's Office expanded and created two new divisions. And one of the two new divisions is the one I'm running, which is the Community Programs and Services Division, which is responsible for all of our external outreach, the recruitment efforts, which I know you've been instrumental and visionary on a lot of the recruitment ideas that are outside the box.
Thank you.
Communi- Communications, contracting, um, and our co-response program, and building that up from scratch for a lot of the different programs that we've got, which excited me. That was kind of a new spark and it really resonated with my why I'm still here. And I know I still have got a lot of gas left in the tank for the remainder of my law enforcement career, and I'm excited to be be afforded the opportunity to take a new challenge and help an awesome organization like the sheriff's office.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that rundown. And I took some notes. There are parts that I want to go back to so I don't forget. Now, when you went into the military, how did your parents feel about that?
They were a little hesitant. I won't lie. They were reluctant with the idea and concept of one of their kids going into the military. My dad served in the South Korean Army back during the Vietnam War, and in the phases of the Vietnam War, NATO actually, as a part of the NATO contingent, South Korea sent 10,000 army troops to Vietnam to fight in the war, and he was one of those 10,000, I think. So that's his perception of service members, and I don't think he wanted that experience for anyone else in the
Yeah.
family, which I get. I get that he doesn't want us exposed to some of the horrors and terrible atrocities that occurred during a war and not to have to deal with that trauma. And, being kind of a stoic guy, he never talked about his military time when I grew up. I only found black and white photos of
Mhm.
him and his buddies, later to find out that dude was in combat, got shot, never mentioned anything about it
Oh,
until, way later on, just a few years ago. And he confided to my wife, just out of the blue. And I totally understand that whole, 1,000 yard stare PTSD thing, because I would catch my dad just sitting in the living room, just staring off into
mm,
nothing, not understanding what he was thinking about. Now I understand why, having better context.
yeah, yeah, and I think it is so helpful to recognize a lot of times these pressures or these expectations from our parents are certainly in our best interest or what they think. They're showing up the best way they can, and they're trying to protect us. For sure, that was a dynamic. I was really intrigued by the JROTC even in high school, and then considered I knew I had a buddy that was doing it at UW, and I always had that draw to service, and seeing 9/11 when I was in high school, like all these things, like there was continually this poking. And when I look back, there I do have a family member that with the Taiwanese military, like had some and has been grappling for his life with some post-traumatic stress for sure, and that came to light more as an adult after becoming a police officer. But then, there's a career Marine, I guess like the Taiwanese equivalent of Marines. I'm not sure exactly what they call them, but pretty stoic as well, right? And so I know that he was very proud to learn that I had entered like the uniform services and public safety. And he would say very few things, but a lot of just, hey, be vigilant and be careful. And he would look at me differently, when I returned back. I've only went to Taiwan a couple times to visit family, but he definitely looked at me very differently. Even though I was, 21, 22-year-old, I still feel like I was a kid looking back. But yeah, I can definitely see it's not for a looking downness on it. But even then, with my Taiwanese family, a police officer in Taiwan, at least back then, was not necessarily a respectable job. It's unskilled labor in a lot of ways, and so and you could even say, there's a lot of skilled trades that you have to go through a lot of training, but
Mhm.
a lot of places in the world don't require much to be a cop.
You're absolutely right when we talk about cultural understanding of why um, people from other parts of the world are really reluctant to talk to law enforcement, and that trust
Hmm.
isn't there. It's just based on their experience from their region or their country, and how policing is totally different from where they came from. And we gotta work to establish that relationship and trust with them, and to show them that this is not the case. We are not them. This is a totally different concept of policing out here.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so, another part that really stuck out to me was your desire to go into the Navy because of leadership opportunities. And there's a lot of people that are great leaders, and they don't necessarily talk about it or recognize that they had that desire. As far as folks I've met in policing, it's more like the fewer and far between that as younger officers, newer officers, when talking about what they want to do, very few that I've run into. And it seems like more and more, maybe just because I've been in it longer, but they're like, yeah, I would love to supervise at some point. I would love to be a sergeant, maybe even a commander. And I was talking to a guy that I was kind of talking about with his career and doing some coaching. He's like a handful of years, maybe like 6, 7 years. But he said something which is pretty rare for me to hear, which is that, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty young and shoot, if things go well, maybe I will be a assistant chief. Maybe I will be a chief before I retire because I got a lot of time to do this and I want to keep learning and challenging myself. And I praise him for that because it's a really uncomfortable thing. It's a really uncommon thing to hear.
You're absolutely right. Because we're humans, we're creatures of habit. Once we get somewhere and we get comfortable, it's like, do I really want to take on that next challenge? And I'm reminded of when all the promotional opportunities came up. You think to yourself, I like what I'm doing. I see the stress on those who are up in the leadership ranks. Do I want that? And also losing the protection of the union, or civil service protection and being at
Yeah.
will. That's always a hesitancy and concern. But I would hope that we have enough good leaders out there portraying what this could be and how you will have an ability to impact change, albeit within your sphere of control. That's for the betterment of the organization and to protect our people. Our greatest asset are our people. And
Yeah.
that's our job as leaders, to put ourselves aside and to do everything we can to take care of them, to make sure they're set up right, even despite all the static and everything else going on outside of our sphere of influence. Um, Making sure that that doesn't get impressed upon our folks. And I will tell you, the military um, was probably as stressful and as difficult as it's been during deployments. It was the best thing to prepare me for leadership roles in a law enforcement organization, and there were a lot of lessons learned that even I still use to today. Were that because they're always on the the leading edge, pointing the tip of the spear when it comes to having to evolve for real operations and people. So I continue serving in the reserves for 21 years and retired back in 2020. And I will tell you, my last tour was serving as the public affairs officer for the Reserve Naval Special Warfare Force, the SEAL teams down in Coronado. And talk about pointing end of the spear. Those are those folks
Mhm.
down in special operations, and gleaning little nuggets from them on how they've integrated into just their culture, some of the leadership principles and practices. Uh, and I've brought those back, and they still are effective to this day. When talking about communicating expectations from the start, the hard conversations that that leaders and supervisors are hesitant to have with their staff. When you just for them, they just don't have the time to dilly and dance around, some of these sensitive topics and subjects, but also do it with enough compassion, because they are people as well. And that's still harnessing and honing a lot of those nuggets out there. That's why you got a lot of the former folks from special forces and special operations that are out there doing these leadership coaching for corporate organizations throughout the country.
Yeah, for sure. I realized I started to ask you the question and then I kind of sidetracked into other things about your life and career. What was it that drew you to that concept that I want to be a leader? I want to take on that type of role in whatever it is I'm doing.
I think it's the knowing the vision and the potential of the people and the organization, um, and kind of that mindset of who can be positioned best to do that, to make it happen. Whether it's being in a support role for someone else to be at the head of that organization or ahead of whatever that project is, and ensuring they have everything they need to be successful. Or if that individual, or if that person isn't there, or it's non-existent, then being willing to step out of my comfort zone and do it and go and make it happen. Cops are, this, Eric. Cops are fixers. If we see a problem, we want to get a solution, and oftentimes that involves us injecting ourselves to go, okay, what do I need? Who do I need to help me out? And what else? What other resources do I need to get the best solution for what's in front of me? Especially for operational things that are right in front of you, but then trying to expand that out strategically into the future. I've always had a running saying, probably for the last 9 years, of what's our vision? What's our vision 2030? And as I look at the calendar now, I'm like, wow, we are really close to 2030. Now we push that out. What do we need to sustain ourselves, and what do we need to be relevant and viable beyond 2030? And that's, as leaders, as law enforcement leaders, and any leader in any organization, we should always be looking in that manner, rather than what's going to get me to tomorrow. It's like, absolutely, we'll deal with that, but also having the mindset to look beyond that. Um, to also look at who's going to be my successor in the seat
Hmm.
that I'm in and in the other leadership seats. So we leave the organization in a good place.
Yeah. There's a couple things, one you just said and one you said earlier, that I want to highlight because I think they are fundamental to people being the right type of true leaders and serving their organization, right, the team. And one was earlier, if not me, then who? And that is something I think every listener can think of a time. It doesn't maybe mean promotion, but at the time they stepped up and they took the lead, maybe on a call or a case or a project, because everyone's talking about it. No one seems to be doing anything. I guess I'm the guy or gal, right? And so it is that ownership to realize the vision you're talking about. And the second piece being who am I training to take my spot, right? Who is your successor? You're training your replacement at all times, no matter what your role is. And even for the 2-year officer, it should be that rookie that's stumbling around, um, looking nervous, and helping them with their nerves as they get ready for their shift with their field training officer, because you are a wealth of experience. You have so much that you've learned since you've been in that similar spot.
Absolutely. I think when we put our pride and ego aside, um, the whole concept of gatekeeping is gone, to where now it's not about me and making myself look good or showing to others how amazing I am. It's really about the organization, and that's how you functionally create that succession plan, to identify, again, being vulnerable enough to share. I know I'm not going to be in this position for the rest of for the rest of my life, or even for a long period of time, to identify people and solicit input, and then get the ability to have some mentoring, rather than leaving a position vacant and someone has to step into it with, I have no idea what this is. And you lose momentum on a lot of those strategic projects and plans. So, and I totally agree with you. When we're talking about why leaders are in those positions, it's easy to talk the talk and say it, but if you're not showing it, you can tell, like, kind of like when people talk about, I'm all about work life balance, and then they're sending emails out at midnight, or they're
Mm,
texting you or messaging you late. It's like, there is no work life balance if what you're sending me is not a priority. It's
yeah.
really got to be a priority. And I message that to my troops as well, is if I call you in the middle of the night, it's got to be really important. Much like I try to queue my emails. Don't get me wrong. Yes, I am, because there's so much volume of work. I am typing up emails and responding to things at night, but it's on delayed delivery, so you don't see that in your inbox till the next day.
Yeah.
Because there's this tendency for cops, military folks as well, that they want to respond immediately, and they're
Yep.
always primed up with their phones or computers to give a response. Like, no, we need to model that better for everyone.
Yeah.
Most of the stuff that we do is not an emergency. It
Hmm.
can wait.
Yeah, no, that's so good. I was just having this conversation with a couple of my sergeants separately, and it's because that is something that I've been working on. I had a conversation with one of the bosses within the last few months to that effect, and I think both of us, I don't think he would take offense, but I would say one of my bosses and myself have both had stints of hitting that workahol pretty hard, and being wanting to be responsive. And I think a lot of that is conditioned from patrol. It's like, boom, what do you got? Here's what I got for you. All right, next one, next one, next one. But we know, especially those that have worked specialties and those that have been supervisors, we know that quicker is not necessarily better. And at patrol, we've called it at our agency anyway, like a lot of times it is short term problem solving or a band aid. And we know a lot of things in the world, medical things, are not fixed with a band aid. You got what you got. It's not to, throw shade at patrol, but it is to say that there's different tools. So patrol's a hammer. Sometimes you got a screw. You can hammer that screw into the wood, but it might not be the best because you can't pull it out later, and you might break the screw and you might mess up the wood. If you have a screwdriver or a specialized unit, being okay, keep up with the metaphors,
Hmm.
listeners. But you drill a pilot hole right before you apply the screwdriver or the impact screwdriver. So that might be the thing, and that's why we have specialization. But yeah, before I keep on this like little metaphor dance, I do like how you illustrated that, because when we're talking about work-life balance, or the illusion of, I like to say, so I think it's a continual imbalance that we just have to recalibrate, because that's what high achievers, high productive, high drive industries need. Is you need the dimmer switch to go on off. But how do you rebalance it? And if you are, and I have seen this in really well intended bosses, but if you are the really well intended chief that truly, truly does want their people to take a beat and not burn out, but you struggle with that and you are firing off the emails at, 11 p.m. or midnight, even if you say, "Hey, I don't want you to do this," you are signaling, you're modeling that behavior, and they might not doubt your intention, but they are going to think, "Well, Chief's doing it. I need to do it too because that's his or her brand. That is the culture that he or she is demonstrating." So I love the example of delayed delivery because I've heard people use it a different way because they're like, "Hey, I don't want anyone to kind of start this ball again until I'm ready." But truly, if you're like, I don't even want anyone to read this because they're about to go on days off, they can hit it when we're all back in the office. So it'll go out first thing that morning when we are going to see each other within an hour.
Hmm. Yeah, because a lot of the people that are, especially your middle managers, and even other leadership members, you're right about the conditioning. They're conditioned to give you a response. They want to be responsive. They want you to know that um, they are good hard workers. And in reality, it's like, we know you're hard workers. That's why you're
Mm,
there. You
yeah.
don't have to prove that to me. And when we get out of our own minds of feeling like we have to prove ourselves, I think we can be even more efficient without burning ourselves out. And that kind of goes into a whole nother wellness topic there.
Yeah, for sure. So mid managers, as you just mentioned, myself being one, looking back in your career, do you have any tips to that? It might be in that kind of that role, because oftentimes I suppose the cynical mid manager says that they're just the middle person, right? They're just passing the information back and forth. And sure, they understand that they need to repackage and know your audience to relay that information back and forth. But do you have any reflections or advice for those that are trying to figure out either their new role in mid management, as we have so many promotions these days, it seems faster than ever because of our young industry, and or like, okay, I feel like I'm in a rut. How do I up level my influence to better the team?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts come to mind, but actually, I kind of go back to, not to nerd out on you, chess. um,
Oh, yeah.
when you're playing the game of chess, you have to look out 2, 3, 4, 5 moves in advance of what you have right in front of you, because some could also be a trap. But when you have that mindset for every, oh, not everything, but a lot of the things that we're doing, especially when it comes to messaging. So let's say you're getting something from top down. Uh, you the expectation for communication should always be, help me to get the why, the true why, not the company why, but because cops can read through it. So if you can start with, what is the why for this, whether or not you like it, it's like, okay, at least I got that noted. And then how do I help to repackage that with understanding what are the next steps beyond it? And that helps the middle manager to message that down to the troops. And it's, sergeants, probably the most critical position and rank that is in any organization. They are the ones that need to be able to repackage that with the full context and understanding, not just the why, but what happens beyond this, rather than, oh, here's a new law change and we got to do this now. Life sucks. Like, no, that then you're just a conduit. You're just a conduit
Mhm.
and you're perpetuating negativity. I need you to help package and message this, which is consistent with the culture, agency's culture, and with the direction that your agency head is trying to get out there. On messaging things upwards, it's the same thing. You get the good idea fairies that are out there saying, we should have this, we need to do that. Think about a couple steps ahead of you. What is the commander needing? What information are they needing? Budget information, policy, for the chief. How is this going to impact politics? What's our current level of cooperation and understanding with different community groups that are going to be impacted? If you can answer all those ahead of time and then be able to package that together and push it up, you have a much more successful chance of getting that concept idea or project up forward, further up the chain, versus just, again, a good idea that's not even in the baking ingredient phase in a Jello box. It's still on the shelf. So help get that all together a little bit better and then push that forward. And I've had line officers, when I was out in Mukilteo, come in with just a basic concept, but they knew all the questions that I was going to ask, from policy, budget, political implications. They were able to answer that in a one-page memo, and the answer to them was, good job, let's get this done, you're in charge of this, figure out with the trainers on how to implement it, because they knew well in advance everything that I needed to get to make that happen. And I think that's where, again, people get demotivated when they have the idea and they try to shoot it up the chain and it gets kind of pushed back. especially with the ask for more info on why it got shot back. And so that's that communication loop and the understanding, I think, will help out the middle managers, I think, to be more successful and not get too demotivated.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's spot on. You use the word conduit, right? Is your contribution to this message literally just clicking forward and see below? Is it like forward FW colon FW colon, right? Like, is that what you've done here? Is that what you've contributed? And
Hmm.
I'm working on this idea, but it's basically, what you hear solution focus a lot. You hear like, hey, like bring solutions. But we realize that a lot of times, like the solutions are very complicated and they're very long term. Like solution for homelessness, solution for mental health crisis. Like, okay, like that going back to that patrol thing. Okay, if you ask someone to bring a solution and they've been doing this 15 years, they're like, I'm sorry, what? Like, what are you asking me to do? Truly, like, so I think a twist that I'm thinking about is like betterment. Like, how do we make this a little bit better? And I wonder what cops would think, whether they're street cops or whether they're detectives and whether they're mid managers, just to say like, okay, you have this thing in front of you. How do you make it a little bit better? So when you get the directive in email, say, hey, please go over this with your troops. How do you make it a little bit better? Okay, you sift through all the information, you give the bottom line up front, and you give your twist on the why, like what you perceive as a helpful thing, and then you say, I just want to give it to you. When I see you, we'll talk about it more, see if you have questions, but bring your questions, we'll talk about it. If you're reviewing a use of force, not just stamp approved, justified, legal, but did you see anything else? Is there a training point? Is there something that, not to critique, but to say, hey, did you think about this? Okay, glad you did. It's hard to see just on a body cam and reading your report. Cool, lessons learned. Just like bring something else to contribute better.
Both on the constructive side, like you talk about, how do we process, improve, or learn something from a training evolution, and on the positive side of, holy smokes, that body cam footage, that is phenomenal.
Mm,
You acted heroically. Someone needs to write this up for an award. That, both concepts absolutely need to be embraced and be more, and our folks, they can be more proactive about that too. Because sometimes we'll see it because we're so busy. It's like, oh, hey, good job. Where one supervisor might be more involved and they'll take the time to do that award write up, where another, it's like, I'm so busy. It's just like, okay, yeah, it's another day. How do we get more consistent on ensuring that we actually are making people a priority and not our processes and our workload?
yeah, yeah, that's solid. I mean, even that recognition, and this is maybe a way to blend the example of a great good work seen and how do we provide recognition and awards and nominations, as well as like the good idea fairy dynamic, right? And so either one, if you're the first line or the mid manager, or you're the line level officer and you are participating in bringing the information, hey, this, like, I saw these guys go to this call. I arrived kind of, Johnny come lately, but I saw them do this. I think an award is warranted, right? So how do you make it easier? Like, how do you better that situation? Is you put some notes down, you ask your boss, like, hey, here's the info. Do you need more for a nomination, or would you like me to write it or draft it? If you're the first line, you could say, awesome. Like, do you have notes that can help me? Like, put stuff down. I can edit it. I can package the thing and take it off. If you're busy, it seems like you are. Um, how can I help you? Right? How can I help in this situation? And because I do have sergeants that they relay, hey, this is award worthy. I'm like, cool. And I worked with them for a couple of years, and I know that they're going to send me the breakdown. And they take great pride in it. They do these fantastic write-ups, and I just edit the language a little bit, and then I put it on the form and send it off. Or they just prep the thing because they want the experience doing it. And so it's know your people and just looking at how you can bring something. And so again, the good idea fairies. Uh, this is not novel to me. I did not come up with this, but sometimes just giving a little bit of homework to see how invested they are is super helpful. You brought that up earlier, right? A little bit of research. What's the funding required? I've had many officer or supervisor say, I want to do this, this, and this. We should do this, right? One of my mentors said, we should be careful with the word should. Rather, we could, and what is the benefit? And just to say, cool, can you do some initial research? Send me a link, like point out some things and a point of contact, or talk to them, do the initial contact. A lot of times it fizzles out. It doesn't mean it wasn't a great idea, but a lot of times when you give that person an opportunity, man, you're really helping them develop as a leader themselves, and they package some things up. They're more invested. And curious what your thoughts are. I like sometimes asking, "Cool, what would you prefer? I like this idea. Do you want me to run with it, or do you want to keep it
Mhm.
and keep working on it?" And
That
you have people take either one.
that's an absolutely great primer to see if their interest is there to go beyond just the idea concept. I was lucky enough to have several chiefs where I would be the good idea fairy, and they're like, "Okay, make that happen with only $1,000.
Mm.
Challenge accepted." And I'll do the legwork, find a way for additional funding, grant funding, donations, or whatever else it may have been within, again, keeping everything within policy and our ethics rules. But come back to, look what I did, boss. And the look on their face was, oh my gosh, okay, all right, I guess I got to approve this now. So it's impressive. You'd be amazed at what people are capable of when they're empowered. Um, to go ahead and try it out, and for those, you want to be able to cultivate the individuals with that the creative mindset and the autonomy, because we need more people like that in our organizations, and potentially moving up the chain as well, if they have that interest to be the future leaders that aren't so rigid and structured where they can't think outside the box, because that's our future. We have to think outside the box. We have to be more creative with how we fund things. We have to be more creative to find solutions to these problems. And you're absolutely right, structural problems and societal issues that we, the law enforcement cog in the machine, we can't solve on our own. We're not going out there. Cheol Kang and Eric Chung aren't going out there, and we're not going to crush the war on drugs. Hey, we won it. Not happening just
We
between
haven't
the two of
tried it
us.
yet. We haven't tried it yet, so
I'll
maybe.
wait for your proposal within a $1,000 budget
Oh
to
man,
send that
okay,
over.
okay. Maybe not. Yeah, I do want to pivot. Okay, so you've been a chief for of different types for going on or over 9 years, right? Because
Mhm.
were you an assistant chief before chief, or what was your rank structure at Mukilteo?
Yeah, at the time, the we had a commander which served as the assistant chief that reported
Okay.
directly to the chief. I served in that position for a little over a year before taking over as chief.
Yeah, I wanna cut into that because as I nodded, my perception is we have such a young industry. We had a lot of attrition of all levels, and so we have this experiential gap. And a lot of my really sharp sergeants and senior officers recognize that, and they stepped up and they promoted quicker than they had intended. And I could even say, in some ways, I did not perceive I'd be a commander at my age, with my agency and the makeup of it. But here we are, and in that, I think that it is a worthy conversation, selfishly as well, when we talk about promoting young and you to take on chief at, did you say 39 when you got
39.
appointed?
Yeah.
And so, even with the times, I feel like there would be even more increased pressure because the majority of my career coming in, people always caution me. They caution me on a lot of things. Senior cops caution young cops on a lot of things. Cynically sometimes, but also to say, hey, like, don't rush it. And you want to map out your career so that you end, with a few years of what you want to do at the end of it, right? And so, with that logic, some would say, you went too fast, you're going to burn out or you're going to lose opportunities. But that's such a limited mindset, and I think that when a lot of us that listen to content like this recognize the power of a growth mindset and the mindset of abundance. And you talked about the risks for sure, and you had a young family, and so many of us do. And so to leave the protections of union and go to an at-will position can absolutely be scary and daunting. So I want to revisit that and see what thoughts you had and what helped you make that decision.
the Everything that came to mind is a plan is only something to deviate from. You can have a well thought out plan mapped out, but reality uh, does not match our plans, and so that's why we need to be, I guess, open minded and willing and nimble enough to even entertain the concept of promotions. When I got promoted, and I would show up to the county chiefs and sheriffs meeting thinking, my word, I'm just a kid in this group, a group of titans that have been in the law enforcement industry, you know, some even as long as I've been alive. It was
Yeah.
just
Hmm.
impressive. But at the end of the day, I'm reminded of, and I will quote the commandant that we had at the Air Force Academy, where he said, the only difference between you and me is some scar tissue, just some different experiences. He's like, not just because I have a star on my shoulder doesn't make me better than you. I just have different life experience than you all do. We all have something of value to bring to the table. Every single person, from the brand new patrol officer all the way up to the longest tenured chief or sheriff that is out there. And when we can go in with that mindset, also with the thought that you have the ability to impact change, you have the ability. Again, it might be smaller change within your scope of influence. Um, don't let that be a barrier. Don't let age or tenure be a barrier. As long as you have the ability to communicate, to relate, and be open-minded enough um, to be able to have good, solid, technical people around you that know what they're doing. As long as you can help facilitate that. So I'll go back to my first Navy assignment. My active duty time, I served as an aerospace engineering duty officer, aviation maintenance. And I think I mentioned to you earlier, I was a history major. All of my counterparts in that field were engineers. They had bachelor's and master's degrees in science in some type of engineering field. I got a C in calculus-based physics in college because the Navy required that.
Yeah.
But I was only successful because I had good people and I knew where to get resources. I was able to build a good network around to support the needs that I had. And gosh, I think of a story. We're in the Persian Gulf, ready to start the light off the Operation Iraqi Freedom. And if I hadn't built the relationships with every other division within the ship and other squadrons, I wouldn't have been able to. At the last minute, we had to get some equipment up to the flight deck from the hangar bay. And when the ship is steaming, ready for flight ops, you don't get the elevator movement. Everyone's like, "Your problem, not mine." And so we would have been SOL without our ability to provide our strike fighter coverage through the electronic attack that our squadron provided. But because I had a good relationship already built up with the weapons officer, they're like, "Hey, we're taking some ordnance up on the smaller elevator that no one utilizes, but yeah, we'll make space for you." So relationships, um, communication, and people, and surrounding yourself and understanding what the people need and do, that made me successful. My technical knowledge wasn't there. In the law enforcement upbringing in my career ladder, I'm not a SWAT operator. If you point me to the 1-2 corner, I'm going to look at you and go, "Where?" That's not me.
Yeah.
I've grown up through the admin ranks and the admin side, but you know what? I will listen to what the operators and the technical experts have for their input and take that into consideration and process that with the needs externally, with what City Hall needs or what the executive staff need, and then make a decision based on everyone's objective inputs. And so that has allowed me to be successful even earlier in age and not necessarily in tenure versus sitting in a seat. And I've seen a lot of people that have been in a seat for a long period of time, but what do they have to show for it?
Mm-hmm.
It's a number, and I think there's a set amount of experience that that people need to get to understand the different portions of their organization. But don't let a number be a barrier based on how much time you're there.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I think it's a way to refocus and repackage the things that a lot of us would agree to and know to be true or even say it, right? Like know your people, know your resources. Like you don't have to be the expert. And a lot of times supervision or any sort of rank, suppose elevation is not about knowing best, but it's about how to access the best, right? And you gave the tactical example. And the more that we have this youth in industry, the more we'll have to do that, right? There's going to be people that are going to be investigators as soon as they get in, and they're going to carry their whole career, and they're going to have so much crazy level of specialized experience in that. And so it's like, how do we listen to them and get the information we need? How do we access them and know that they're there? Because we all know that a lot of the best cops are not the best supervisors. Contrary, right? Like it's a different skill set in itself. And being the coordinator, being the facilitator, being the communicator, a lot of times is not doing the thing, the hands-on thing, but being able to kind of leverage that. So I love that. And then when you're talking about plan, I just posted recently. We're recording start of the summer, basically, but it was this a paraphrase that I heard, which is plan on your plan, not going to plan. And But even as you said, I was thinking about the flip of it's not necessarily a bad thing, but the plan not going to plan could be a good version, right? Where I didn't foresee this. And I don't want to go down too far down the rabbit hole of mindset and, kind of this positive thinking, but my life is way better than I expected it to be for much of my life looking back. And I didn't expect myself to have like a terrible life. I thought I'd have a totally fine life, but I feel like I have an amazing life in most ways. Amazing life, amazing family and careers. Like let's recognize the power of that too.
You, you're absolutely right. There's a number of days I've sat in my chair, whether it was over in Mukilteo or I'm in King County now, where I think to myself, who would have thought that this little immigrant kid would be a chief? Not me. No, no
Yeah.
way. It's mind-boggling. It's humbling. My wife, a few folks I shared this with. She took my original green card, alien registration card. She found it in a bunch of stuff that my parents brought over when they're cleaning out the house, and she framed that
Mm.
and she put that on top of my dresser. And every day when I get up in the morning to get dressed, that's my reminder of no matter how bad of a day that I had the day before. Look where I was, and look where I am now. There's a lot to be grateful for. To put that into context, all that other stuff, again, that were problems or emergencies, it's really insignificant compared to where I am now. And I hope a lot of folks are able to put that into context as well as where they are, because we get so caught up in these dramas and issues and stressors in our life and work. It's like it's really not a big thing.
Yeah, yeah, and that should carry a lot of weight coming from someone that has carried those roles, like chief of a smaller agency and now divisional chief of a huge agency. And we can all recognize a lot of people don't want to promote because of the perceived stress. And yes, I will say from my own experience, there is a lot of stress in promotion. But then it kind of settles out because you learn it and you get used to the type of stress. And if I'm being honest, and hopefully this is encouraging to a lot of people, there are a lot of times I had an extremely stressful assignment, but very different, right? And K9 was one of the most stressed I was, period. I had such a stress to perform and to like learn as a team because there's a learning curve and you're only as good as your last track. And so the pressure's on, all eyes are on you. That's a unique stress that I have not felt in a long time, probably until I got to recruiting because it was a new assignment. We cut out some staffing to invest in that attempt, right? That challenge. And so all eyes were on me again, right? And like if it fails, it's because of me. And I took that on. I didn't really truly believe that, but I did kind of tell myself that, and I think that was why we did great, right? Like the team really came alongside and supported that, and I was able to just kind of be the coordinator on a lot of things. But all to say, for those debating about promoting, think about that. Like you've experienced a lot of stress, you've navigated it. This is just a different hat, a different role. Absolutely, you can do it if you got the right stuff, and that means value, character, and desire.
I want to ask you, during those two examples that you gave of changing positions and a totally new job and the stress that you felt, was there anything in particular that you were able to do to help mitigate that stress or overcome that?
That's a great question. Love when the questions come back sometimes. For K9, I think what helped was trusting the process and knowing that I needed reps and reps and taking ownership. So when I say trusting the process, that's not passive. A lot of people, we all know people, whether cops or not, that take that passively. But it is like you mentioned earlier, what is in the locus of my control and leveraging all my resources. So I just telling someone about this recently, but when we felt like things weren't gelling, I had strong relationships in my crew, my graveyard crew, and they were like we were solid. We hung out a lot on duty, we hung out a lot off duty. Um, Really kind of some aspect of golden days, golden years for me. But literally every night, almost every single officer on my crew did something to help me in training. We set these kind of like these little tracks, little toy tracks, or someone would put the sleeve on. We would do mock traffic stops, contacts. So it was basically like there's a little chunk of a training day in every single shift if time allowed, and usually it did in the 0300 kind of hour. And so taking personal agency and leveraging the team and investing in them, so they wanted to invest in us, and there was truly like genuine relationship there because they all wanted to see me, the dog, Kato, and us like as a crew succeeds. So that's one piece. I say like zoom out, trust the process, but influence the process. Um, the second one, a couple things. One was what's the worst that can happen? And thinking sometimes I go to like, what is the absolute freaking worst thing that can happen? And I'm like, well, we don't improve recruiting, and they put me back in a different assignment. They put me back in my last role, or I'm a street sergeant, and we keep rolling. And that's not that's not catastrophic. So going to the worst case scenario and then coming back to it probably won't happen because I don't think that we'll hire nobody. I don't think the stats will get worse than they are right now. I think that we have really good ideas and really good people. Let's do it. And so going to that place and then coming back and it's like, okay, let's do the work. Let's just grind. And part of it was thinking in some ways that like, I mean, we had to try everything, so we were willing to, and getting fueled on that, like that do or die kind of mentality was very motivating.
I love how you encapsulated the team, that you're not doing this alone, and there are people that will help you if you're willing to accept that help. And then the perspective of is what's the worst that's going to happen, because we our emotions and our ego kind of drive us down that rabbit hole of, oh my gosh, this is going to be terrible or catastrophic. But you explained it objectively. It's not. It probably won't go down that path. And this is the worst that's going to happen, where we're kind of perseverating on, oh my gosh, it's my image and people aren't going to like me or they're going to think I'm lazy. But in reality, that's not the case. You got to push those demons aside and really focus on what's objectively truly going to happen as the worst case scenario. But with time, you explained it. You overcame that, and look at you. Look at you being all successful and being a recruiting champion that you are, and wellness champion. So kudos to you, Eric.
Trying. It's you're only. I mean, I'm not. I do accept the compliment. It was great. It was definitely a highlight. Something I'm proud of to be involved with. But it's like I think a lot of that comes with it. We're not done. Like we're just getting started, and so I feel like that continual chipping away that I see in your career and a lot of what you've shown and discussed and kind of shared with us is that I don't it you explain it in such a calm, casual way, but I imagine I'm kind of perceiving there's this like this fire to keep like developing yourself and thus developing your teams that you're involved with. And I think that is a lot of why, you were nominated essentially, why someone's like, hey, you need to get Chief Kang on because XYZ. And you've really shown that. I had no doubt, but I'm really glad as soon as our conversation got started.
Thank you. I am humbled. Thank you for that.
Let me ask you this, Chief. So, going from the challenge of, and I know so many people that work for smaller agencies, and there are a lot of dynamics that make it specifically challenging, but then also large agencies. Do you have any kind of quick takeaways on like the differences that you perceive, either the pros and cons or things that people can take with them, in reflecting on what you've learned or what you can look back on in your very drastically different roles?
Are you referring specifically to what the job is entailing? And forgive me for
Yeah,
further
no, no.
clarification on that.
What I was thinking is I perceive, being chief of Mukilteo on. Can you remind me how many sworn
Uh,
Mukilteo was?
Including the all commission 31.
Okay. Yeah. So not tiny, but
Hmm.
not huge. And then now, technically, how many officers or deputies, and maybe even throw in staff, right? Because there's a
Yeah.
lot of civilian staff you oversee.
Commission sworn staff, it's almost 800.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. So
a
that's a huge department on itself. Like,
Mhm.
there's no other outside of Seattle. Is Tacoma that big? They're not that. They're
I
not
think
that big, are they?
Seattle and State Patrol are probably the biggest with regards to total sworn, that we would consider like peer agency for size.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's a different landscape.
very much so. And there's maybe some perceptions of things may work in a smaller agency, compared to a larger organization like the sheriff's office. There may be some different processes, and some things you may need to include other entities, versus being a bit more nimble, where you can make changes pretty quick. when you have fewer touch points on a process change, where at King County being such a large entity, and not beyond just the sheriff's office, King County as a whole, when you're making larger code structural level changes, it's a much longer process, and you got to have patience on that. I think that's we are so impatient as cops because we
Yes.
want answers and solutions right now. And it really is just managing expectations and explaining this is what the process is and this is what it takes to everyone, where you see a problem and you want to fix. Kind of like with recruiting, someone will have that idea of, well, if you fix this in the process, we should have all these fixes. It's like, well, that fix involves like 5 different entities, and we need
Mm-hmm.
to get buy-in and for them to understand why the change is going to occur and what are the second and third order effects of that change. I think that the biggest difference I find is, well, I'll start with the people process is the same. No matter where you are, the size of your organization, the challenges that we face, and the work that we're doing, it's almost identical no matter where you are.
Yeah.
Different landscape, just different people, different names. So that, if you go in with that understanding that this is the same, and not get frustrated with that, the processes may take a little longer because it's just a large organization, you gotta spend just as much time having to message that out, the why, to everyone. I'm all about Simon Sinek and explaining what is the why, not just my why, but what's the why behind why that process is taking so long, or what is the plan for people to hear it. And anything in communications, it's you got to have multiple touch points on it, and in dealings that I have with the city council in Mukilteo, the thought of, hey, I already explained this to you all once, and it's clearly in the agenda packet. Why are you asking me the same questions? But also having the context that these are part-time folks who maybe didn't have the time or were so busy doing other things. They have other lives and they only show up on Monday to do the meetings. So don't take it personally.
Mm-hmm.
Invest the time to communicate, over communicate, really, I think at this point. Um, and that, I think, is what I've learned over the last 2 years with the sheriff's office is we got to spend a lot of time and effort getting folks to understand, get them on board with the concepts, get buy-in on that as well. Where I've learned from, even my small mistakes in Mukilteo, if you can't just ram down a concept idea to everyone without getting buy-in, even if it is statistically, this is the best thing to do to have a power shift because this is a greater volume of calls. But if they don't understand the why and don't get the buy-in from it, that's doomed to fail. And so I think that spending more time, there's a lot more meetings, a lot more time meeting with folks, but that's my job. That's why I'm here, and that's why I love doing what I do. It's the people process of it.
Yeah, I thank you for walking through that. One thing that sticks out for sure is the patience involved, and I think it goes back to that patrol aspect where, hey, I see the problem. I have a better option. Like I see a course of action. Let's go. But yeah, I think it's healthy also to recognize that bureaucracy exists everywhere. So those that are in big agencies that might be like, yeah, that's right. Well, it actually is not just even big agencies. It's not just cop. It's not just government. My wife helped me in some ways give permission and more patience because she worked for big corporate. She worked for a startup that the startup was really nimble when everyone is aligned. But if they were not, then it's just any organization. It's all people. It's people, personalities, different opinions, and so you gotta kind of work through it and work with it. And so it's not like we just have it so bad, like we throw our hands up in the air, like, well, of course. Like, no, you got to work at it. So again, how do you make it better? So uh, Chief Kang, I this has been fantastic. We've covered a lot, and probably when there's literally a lot of things I want to keep asking you about, but I worry that would open up to like another 20 or 40 minutes. Um, just simply means I probably have to have you back. But um, thank you so much. Is there anything that you'd like to leave the listeners with? Recognizing that people are listening from all different types of experience levels and assignments.
Absolutely. Well, Eric, I'll start with I appreciate the work that you're doing with this podcast and exploring leadership and wellness. This is something that we need to do more of across the law enforcement industry. It is to sustain what we're doing right now, and how do we continue that well into the future. So you're organically making that happen. I appreciate your support and all the work that you've got going on. And
Thank
and
you.
I would be more than happy to come back and keep talking about Anything else that you have with regards to the platform discussions, wellness, leadership, or food, which
Oh
that could
yeah.
be a whole nother tangent as well. So
Yeah, when you were
um,
at the Korean barbecue, just serving up your team.
yeah, so yeah, not to go off a whole nother subject, that's how you break down barriers and learn more about cultures is through the food. That's why I love the travel to
Likewise.
learn more about people and culture, language, and also enjoy some delicious tasting morsels as well. So,
Hmm.
I guess what I'll end with is, those out there who are thinking about leadership roles, don't get discouraged by the stressors that we're facing out there. And much like with everything else, things will change over time. We just need to reach an equilibrium. There's been, a large loss of our experience and the leadership that's been there for a while. So, there's that kind of that vacuum in there. But we need good people to fill that role and be willing to take up the charge and continue on the mission of what we're doing out there in our agencies, and to help our people, our staff, the men and women in our agencies, to be successful. We need you out there. So I would continue to encourage that. And Eric, thanks again for having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Chief King. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.